Hello and welcome to the show. Now, V8 Supercars is certainly a lot about the rivalry between Ford and Holden, and certainly for quite a long time, they were the only two manufacturers in the championship. However, of late, more have been joining. Mercedes now have a car, as do Volvo and as do Nissan. This kind of got me thinking, what would it be like trying to turn some vehicles in Forza 6 into V8 Supercars? Could I actually make them be vaguely competitive? Sounded like a challenge to me, so I set about doing that. Now, first of all, of course, I would have to set a benchmark time with an actual V8 supercar. So, of course, I went for the Volvo. I'm a big fan of the Volvo, and I had to set some rules for the building of the cars. Try and build them as best I could to a V8 supercar spec. So, cars were not allowed to have more than 670 horsepower. The Nissan has 669, I believe, so the cars I was going to build weren't going to have more than 670 horsepower. Of course, they had to have a V8. I was going to try and keep with naturally aspirated V8s as well. The minimum weight was to be 3,109 pounds. That is the weight that all of the official V8 supercars are, so I wasn't allowed to go under that. And tyre size, I was going to have to try and keep to 280 width tyres, both front and rear. They were the restrictions for the vehicles. I was going to try and build four-door cars, sort of modern four-door vehicles to that specification. See if they could actually compete with an actual V8 supercar. And our test track of choice, the Catalunya National Circuit. I like this as a test venue. It's a very good sort of overall track. Some fast corners, slow corners, and a nice long straight. The first vehicle that I would build up, the Chrysler 300 SRT8. An interesting prospect, this one. I wasn't quite sure how these were going to fare. This one came out with 643 horsepower. That is with the engine naturally aspirated with all of the parts that I could put on it. So I couldn't quite get the maximum power out of the vehicle. However, it does have 603 foot-pounds of torque, which is a hell of a lot. There is a downside with the Chrysler. It is quite heavy. 3,435 pounds, so we're like a 300 pounds over the weight, and that's with the full-on weight reduction, all of the race parts, lightened wheels. All the cars that I built here were using the same wheels. They're as light as you can get. We're still 300 pounds overweight, which is a little bit of a problem. And there are a couple of other problems as well. The brakes are very noticeable with these vehicles, both the Chrysler, a lot of these cars actually, the Dodge that would go next, very noticeable that the braking performance is nowhere near the likes of the V8 supercars themselves. This Dodge, 648 horsepower, so only a little bit more than we got from the Chrysler, a little bit more torque as well, 608 foot-pounds of torque from this one, but again we're talking 3,400 pounds in the Charger. So we have similar issues. The brake just does not get stopped anywhere near as well as the Volvo. You brake a lot earlier, and we do not have the composure. We really do not have the composure through the corners. The Charger was a very wiggly car. The Chrysler actually wasn't that bad. I gotta say, the Chrysler was actually a relatively nice car to drive, in all honesty. But this Charger was a little bit of a pain in the arse, really, to get this one around the track. It did very much like sliding around. You had to be incredibly careful if you were going to try and get a half-decent lap out of the car. There just wasn't the grip in this vehicle whatsoever. Up next, this one, another quite an interesting vehicle, the Lexus ISF. Now, I love the ISF. It's actually I think it's quite an underrated four-door super saloon car. This one comes with a V8. We could only get 637 horsepower in this vehicle, again, keeping the car naturally aspirated. 483 foot-pounds of torque. Actually pretty good, pretty comparative figures for a V8 supercar, and the weight much better, 3,110 pounds. So pretty much there with the with the weights on this one. Very, very comparative figures to the V8 supercars. Again, the immediate thing that strikes you, the most glaring difference is the braking. The Lexus, even though it is the same weight, we've got race tyres on it, the braking is just not quite there. The tyre widths were a bit of a pain in the arse with some of these cars. The V8 supercars were 280 all round, but a lot of these cars, I think I was stuck with 265s on this Lexus, which certainly wouldn't have helped. Because I just don't get the options. I think it's either 265 or 285, and I was trying not to cheat with the Lexus, but it was a good car. Up next, Maserati Gibble. Yes, I was very excited to have a go with the Gibble. However, I did have to cheat a little bit with with this one. Admittedly, the rear tyres, I think, start off at 285s on this one, so it's kind of, yeah, it's already over the limit. Now, to get a V8 in this, you have to swap in the Ferrari 458 engine. However, that maxed out without using the turbos. Doesn't actually give you a huge amount of horsepower. I think about 620-ish, so I did have to cheat and stick a turbo on this just to get the power. We got 672 out of this in the end with a turbo installed, but yeah, even with a couple more horsepower, yeah, there were still some issues with this car. Weight-wise, again, we're down to 3,131 pounds. As I said, a slightly cheaty build, but we were still having problems getting the vehicle stopped. And even with that little bit more power, it's yeah, we were still having the handling issues that were the biggest problem. This one was a curious build. I didn't know what to expect at all from the Subaru. I kind of threw it in when I realised I could put the 5.7 litre V8 in this one. Again, I had to go for a turbocharger on this one to ramp the power up. I was finding a lot of these engines couldn't get up to 670 horsepower naturally aspirated. None of the engines you can swap into cars, and the V8 engines you can swap into cars, sorry, could get up to 670 or around that kind of figure without going for a turbocharger. Certainly not. This particular engine wasn't a great engine for power. Weight-wise, again, we're at 3,111 pounds. But our big issue with this car is handling. It's far too slidey. It is far too slidey. Really very oversteery. Quite a quick car, but very oversteery. I was seriously fighting a lot with keeping it under control. Again, you can see the back end is constantly wanting to go around on you. Another car converted to a rear-wheel drive. Of course, these vehicles all converted to rear-wheel drive. That's what the V8 Supercars we run as. So, yeah, this Audi RS7 converted to rear-wheel drive. I didn't change the engine in this one, but the standard engine itself comes with turbos. So, again, it's a slightly cheaty build with this one. 671 horsepower in this, 633 foot-pounds of torque, though. Impressive amount of torque in this car. I was actually surprised how light I could get the RS7 as well. 3,167 pounds in this build. So yeah, that's actually not as heavy as I thought it was going to be. A massively heavy car, but yeah, not too bad in this. I quite like the RS7 actually. This was starting to get down a little bit closer to the actual V8 supercar handling wise. The problem is the same story we were seeing time and time again. The brakes were not good enough. The brakes just simply weren't getting the car stopped quick enough. As quick as it was for V8 Supercars, it would go as quick in a straight line, and then you have to brake a hell of a lot earlier. Up next, Jaguar. Again, we're going for a slightly cheaty build in that this again has got forced induction. I can't take off the supercharger on this build, much the same with the Audi. I can't take off the turbo, can't take off the supercharger. In the Jaguar, I do quite like the XF RS. I think it looks fantastic. It drives from standard very well. I think it sounds fantastic as well. Yeah, I do like this car. 666 horsepower in this one. Not quite as much as the Audi. 574 foot-pounds of torque. Yeah, not quite the most impressive. It's still more torque than we get from the V8 Supercars, mind. But we're back to having a weight issue with this one. 3,400 pounds, of course, with all of the race parts put on. I got a little bit wide going to that final corner at a very big slide. Yeah, I mean, we're 300 pounds heavier than the cars we're competing against. Is less than ideal with the Jaguar. I did like this car again, much like the Audi. This one here was quite a good car to drive. It was still the braking issues, trying to get it stopped, and of course the oversteer problems was something you had to be aware of. And then we come to the BMW. After all of these builds, I was seeing fairly consistent problems with the cars. And then we come to the M5. Again, another turboed car, but I can't do anything about them. 669 horsepower. In this one, 585 foot-pounds of torque, 3,174 pounds. So it's a little bit heavy, but it's not too bad. It's there or thereabouts. The big thing with the BMW are the brakes. This gets stopped like a V8 supercar. Not quite as well as the Volvo, but it's very close. So much closer than the other cars I had been driving. This one, you could brake so much later with this than any of the other cars, aside from the Volvo, of course. You really could push this car a lot more under brakes. Of course, Power delivery was still a little bit wonky. This was also another one of the cars that came with 285 rear tyres, so they were slightly larger. Again, I'm doing the best that I could with the vehicles that I had. The times, though, well, the Volvo still won by a second, in fact, almost exactly a second over the BMW. Audi came in second. I put an asterisk next to the cars that had slightly cheaty builds. So the BMW and Audi were both turbo. The BMW had slightly bigger tyres, but I can't do anything about them. That's just how the game starts with them. The quickest non-slightly cheaty thing, Lexus ISF 18.7, actually a pretty good time from that Lexus. The Jaguar an 18.9. The Gibble with a 19.0. The Chrysler did better than I thought it might, a 19.2. Not too bad from that particular vehicle. The Impreza struggled with huge oversteer, and the Charger was just a little bit difficult getting that through the corner. I mean, the Chrysler beats the Charger by a second a lap around here, which is, I reckon, pretty good going from that Chrysler. Yeah, my best efforts at building the cars, we were still a second down on that Volvo. Even the M5 with turbos and slightly too larger rear tyres, I couldn't get it within a second. I think the Lexus is perhaps the surprise result in that table, though. So I went back and took the BMW to do some tuning with the car. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not an amazing tuner. I mean, only being a second down on the Volvo, I wondered if I could tinker around with things, if I could get things a little bit closer for this vehicle. I gave it some more camber. I actually maxed the downforce out on this car. Just try to give it as much handling as possible around the circuit like this. I figured we give it some downforce, we can get some more grip, we can carry that bit more corner speed with it. I got the car, I think I got it down to about a 17.8 around here. I'm sure a better tuner could get the car to go quicker. I'm equally sure if I actually started tuning the Volvo, I could get that to go quicker as well. So I could get some more time out of the BMW, and certainly of all of the vehicles that I built, all of the vehicles that I drove, the M5 was definitely the closest to being an actual V8 supercar. Yes, admittedly, it has got turbos, and I was surprised actually by quite a few of the engines requiring turbos to actually get enough power out of them to actually be competitive. I wasn't expecting that when I set out building these cars. So the BMW was a mighty impressive machine. It was definitely the closest to the actual V8 supercars, but even with my best efforts at building them, I couldn't quite make anything to really properly rival the official cars. It was good fun though, giving it a try and seeing how the vehicles turned out. Anyway, that is it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.